Welcome to the Lovecars on the Grid podcast, your global motorsport roundup with me, Tiff, Needell and Paul Woodman.
Welcome to Lovecars on the Grid, your global motorsport podcast roundup. So what was the most exciting motorsport of the weekend? We had plenty going on, no real big events going on, but there was a Safari Rally, there was BTCC, which is big, of course, Moto GP, NASCAR, big if you're over the other side of the pond, and there was this Moto McNurtry thing at Goodwood Festival of Speed that we'll speak about a little bit later on, and somebody went up the hill at Goodwood on a high-speed run.
Oof, I look forward to hearing about that.
So Tiff, Needell, how are you?
Very
the
well.
Safari Rally, you know that quite well. I don't. Was it
Well,
worth the watch?
again, but I never know, was it the most exciting motorsport? Well, the trouble is, watching one rally car go through some of those stages in this fight is incredibly exciting, incredibly impressive. But it's just that you can't watch it live because it doesn't really work with rallying, because obviously it's cars coming 3-4 minutes apart depending on the dust and the dirt. It's an incredible sport, always will be. The drivers are just sensational and stunning. But unfortunately, at the moment, the World Rally Championship is going through a bit of a hiatus. They changed the new regulations. They got their dreaded hybrids have come in and made things more complicated, unnecessarily, in my opinion. But there we go. Motor manufacturers like it. And the result was, it almost sums up the season, because it was a Toyota 1, 2, 3, 4, which hasn't happened for many, many years. Hyundai were fifth, and Hyundai, again, is typical. They only had one survived of the front runners, Thierry Neuville, because they're always fast but fragile. They've had an awful year. And then poor old Ford's just sort of pretty much as usual, bringing up the rear end in 6th, 7th and 8th. Craig Breen, the best of the field. But he crawled through the last stage with no power. And poor old Craig. Craig's lovely because he's this Irishman wears his heart on his sleeve, When he got a full-time world championship ride a while ago, he was in tears at the end of the stage. I can't believe I'm lucky enough to be doing this. This is the best thing, I love him. But the end of this final scene, it was like, stump the gear to drive away from the interview. Nothing's right, nothing's working, it's not working. So it was very hard again. Your heart.
Where's he from? Did you say Ireland? What was
Ireland?
What was that?
Well, yeah, okay.
What was with that accent?
Well, yeah, all right, okay. I apologize. Sorry, Craig. I was just trying to put a bit of character into the podcast. But there's the stages in there. So they were hitting like ploughing dust with their splitters, and the whole car was like covered over the windscreen. You couldn't see for. Someone actually stopped at one time in a stage because he just lost his bearings in a hairpin. He'd gone plowed sand all over his car. Just couldn't see. He had to wait for the sand to settle to know which way to drive back out again. Really tough on the cars, very, very hot, which is another thing. But through it all, yet again, this 21-year-old Kalle Rovanpera ended up being quickest. He had to start the first day. Championship leader has to start first. This was always this huge disadvantage because you're sweeping the dust, you're clearing the tracks for those to follow and go quicker. And he was down in, 5th or 6th or 7th to day one, but works his way through. Amazing, finishes first. And he's just romping away with the championship. Thierry Neuville, amazingly, the second is still a Hyundai, Thierry Neuville, who's actually scored points in every rally, which very few people ever do. But he's 65 points behind Rovanpera with 25 points for a win. So Rovanpera's got to disappear for 3 rallies.
To be that good at that age is incredible. As a driver, is incredible. But to have that mental ability is something else as well.
Yeah.
Phenomenal. They're all so talented, these boys. They really.
I know. Kalle hadn't done a safari before. He was a bit ill on day 2. I think Saturday morning he felt pretty sick. I think the pressure, the heat, and the dust. There's dust coming into those cars, even when they're not sand over the top. They've got terrible inhalation of dust. It's a tough world being a rally driver. And I'm talking about tough. And Gus Greensmith, one of the Ford who had the worst of the Ford weekends, he had an awful situation, which is actually very concerning, because the Safari Rally hasn't been run a lot until last year. I think last year was its return, or maybe 2 years ago. But he ended up rolling over. He ended up the car on its side, and they couldn't get the door open that was up at the top. I don't know if that was jammed. But the chief marshal stopped people approaching the car. Now, I don't know what, they're obviously the very amateurish, I won't say amateur, marshals could only get this one big rally a year. They've also got some national rallying going on. But with this hybrid system, I can only assume, I should have done more research if I couldn't find any more info, that with the electric capacity, that's all this, that if the light's on, you don't touch the car, nobody must touch the car. So I think she was actually doing perhaps what she was briefed to do. You mustn't But I mean, if the car burst into flames, I mean, Gus in the end had to kick the windscreen out to get the two out of them. They were crying for help. One photographer approached the marshal on the YouTube stuff and said, well, we've got to help them. They said, no. Because there is a danger that someone touched the car will get electrocuted, in theory. I don't know quite. Because I haven't noticed in Formula One, when Formula One first started having hybrid, all the marshals were coming up with huge rubber gloves on, didn't they? I haven't noticed so much that. I don't know quite how they're working out, how marshals should be trained for the electric revolution. I mean, in Formula E, I don't know. I don't really know. There's always this, if there's a light on the car, it's safe. If there's a green light or a red light. So I think normally it's very rare that this light comes on to say a Formula E car isn't safe. But it wasn't good. I mean, they were just filming the car inside. Normally in Britain, all the fans run over, put him back on his wheels, go, Gus, go. But nobody was allowed to get near the car to push it back on its wheels. And they had to kick themselves out. So it was quite
the solution is, if you go to watch a rally, wear rubber gloves.
Then you can help put cars back on the road.
It is a scary old glove.
Anyway, and it wasn't the most exciting event because it's hard to watch it.
Exciting then, Tiff Needell?
Well, again, it wasn't the British Touring Car Championship, which normally would be top of my list.
Hyundai were doing well again. They did well in the rally. They won
the greatest, the feel-good story was, of course, this fantastic winning the first two races for Dan Lloyd, who'd had this spectacular crash at Alton Park 2 weeks ago, and they thought, he needed £100,000 to rebuild his car. Because most British touring cars, they're all privateers bringing their own money. There's very few professional paid drivers anymore, like the old days of the 1990s, the super touring. So they'd fixed the car, so huge congratulations to the team, and he came out again and he won the first two races. Only third qualifying, and he did overtake. But the trouble is processional racing. We talked about this last week. I've already said last week that the new hybrid boost button is so small it doesn't really do enough of an effect. Whereas the big 75 kilos, whatever it was, success ballast is what made touring cars so unpredictable. Because the championship leader carrying 76 kilos, that's like a second and a half a lap, and he'll be floundering, he'd be overtaken, and he'd dropping back in the pack. But, I looked at the first race, the first 10 qualifiers, 9 of them finished in the first 10 with very few changes. So out of the top 10, the only person not of the top 10 qualifiers that didn't finish in the top 10 was Gordon Shedden, who had his suspension broken at the first corner, so finished last. Came through from the back of the grid in the second race to finish 12th, and then the lucky ball was number 12, which has happened quite often this year. So Gordon Shedden duly won the reverse grid race. But it does worry with touring cars. I think it's just processional at the moment because it's very hard to overtake. Very determined, successful, very skilled drivers in all the cars. So
we would like to see more overtaking. But so Tom,
the Ginetta Juniors, mind, just to finish off the Croft story, were absolutely amazing. They made up all the action, the excitement was the Ginetta Juniors. They were like 4 abreast and packs of 4 into corners. Tremendous. Congratulations to all the juniors that survived without any major shunts. So in
terms of BTCC, just because we haven't got that much on this week, it's worth saying anyway. But Tom Ingram leads the pack. Just Josh Cook second. Turks in third, then Ash Sutton fourth. So it looks like it's a bit of a 4-horse race at this stage, but it's still pretty fun to go.
The Cook Hondas were slow. He had an engine trouble in the first race. He dropped right back, but he survived the weekend by getting second in the reverse grid race, which was his best bit.
So if that wasn't the most exciting motorsport moment of the last weekend, what was? Was it Moto GP by any chance?
It was. I mean, we always get these tweets. Everyone says boring, Formula One's boring, and I watch MotoGP. And Assen is one of the greatest racing circuits for bikes. It just seems to have all the right corners in the right order to challenge the riders, but also enough straights for slipstreaming, so it's very hard to get away. And there's so much overtaking. And it was just all 3 races, Moto 1 and 2, well, it's not Moto 1, but MotoGP, were amazingly exciting races. We had this spectacle of Fabio Quartararo, this runaway championship leader from France, looking to consolidate his lead for a second year in a row title, taking out his main rival. We had out front was Francesca Bagnaia, this Ducati rider, who's and so many problems. The other teams, he's still in the press conferences, cannot work out why he fell off in Germany a week ago, or whatever it was, because the back just went from under him, and he just, he says, "Well, I did exactly the same thing as the previous lap," and he was still one. Yeah, I don't know what happened, but he's now had 3 wins from the last 6 races, but 3 retirements. So he's got this win or bust season going, which isn't enough to put the Ducati really into the championship fight. Because the championship fight is between Quartararo on his Yamaha and Alex Espargaro on the Aprilia. And it was Alex that Quartararo took out with this lunge up the inside, very unlike his character, lunged up the inside. They were running second and third. Bagnaia had got the start and disappeared. Well, not disappeared, he was just ahead of them. So he takes Espargaro into the gravel traps. Alex went down and when he just about gunned it back out the gravel, dropped about 14th, and then had this amazing fight back to the field, picking off, closing the gap, picking off, closing the gap. And on the last lap at the famous Assen chicane, it's called the GT chicane, which is a horrible word for it, but anyway, doesn't seem right. It needs a better name. Assen, please find a better name for your GT chicane. It went from 6th to 4th with a lunge up the inside of the 2 that were already side by side for 4th. So he got a lot of points back. Quartararo came into the pits having dropped it in the gravel when he took out Alex. He didn't want to go back out the track. He looked like in the pits of the telly, the team manager said, go back out, we might pick up a odd point or 2. Anyway, I think he'd broken his aero. Aero is now a big thing in bikes. These little square boxes in front of the handlebars have got downforce but he'd broken all those when he fell off. And he had another big crash, quite high, something nasty, and sort of was limping back to the pits to probably tell his team manager a few French expletives for sending him back out again. Luckily, they've now got 5 weeks break before they're back out again. So any injuries he did have, he should have gone. Same as touring cars, both on 5-week summer breaks. So yeah, the whole motor, there was just racing all the way through the Moto GP race. You were saying?
Unlike NASCAR, that they had
goes on every week.
A week off last week. But where were they this weekend, Tiff?
Nashville. But just back to the bike. Moto 2, Jake Dix was on pole, Sam Lowe's third, Brits filling the front row, well, almost filling. And Jake battled hard, didn't lead, ended up third, but was very happy with that. Really good race. Sam Lowe's was pushed wide at the first corner and then ended up dropping into the sand trap. So poor old Sam's, because he had a 3rd place. Was it 3rd place in Germany last weekend? But he's now had 7 did-not finishes from 11 races. Wow. And whether Sam's going to keep his ride for next year. He's always quick, but things never go wrong. Pedro Acosta, our little favourite, our Moto GP, Moto 3 hero, like many bikers, broke his leg training on off-road bikes. The number of shunts they have, bikers, injuring themselves, going out to training camps. Because, I mean, Valentino Rossi did it a few years back himself. He's got his own training track. So I don't know how long will we be at? He's a broken femur. These motorbike boys tend to go back. He's got 5 weeks, I suppose.
They come back with broken, unhealed. They come back with still in the casts. They are just crazy. I've never known people like it. So
just as Acosta, because he had a win and then a second. He's just getting on the pace of Acosta in a Moto 2, and he does that.
So do they have a 5-week break as well?
It's all off for 5 weeks.
So he did it at the right time then.
So his teammate, Fernandez, another Spaniard, won again. He was third, 2 on the trot, 3rd of the year, and he's now equal on points at the top of the Moto 2 championship with the Italian Celestino Vietti, who finished 4th in Assen.
Your Italian's better than your Irish, to be fair.
Moto 3, just breathtaking racing. And again, great stories. Ayuma Sasaki, who I don't know how I think he's been in it for about 3 years and never won. Always up the front, always fast, and he battled through this amazing 10 people leading at one time. The Brits, Scott Ogden had a right off weekend. I don't know, he had a bit of a trouble behind the scenes when he qualified 24th and a very retro step, and then he crashed in the race. He's had a bad weekend, so he's got 5 weeks to get his brain sorted out. John McPhee, though, he only qualified 11th, having dropped it in qualifying on his own, trying to keep with the pack, which he admitted to. Then about the first or second corner, he was pushed wide and dropped about 30th and last, and came back through a 30-bike field to get in the leading pack. He was second for a while. I'm not sure he ever actually led, but he was in the bunch, the 6. It was a 6-pack by the end of the race. So an awesome drive by McPhee. But with about a lap and a half to go, third and fourth clashed in front of him. Both went down. And McPhee, he was sort of a bike or two behind, and he went, whether he reacted to see what was happening in front of him or whether he's going for a move on his own. But poor old John dropped it himself. So, that it was left to only a bunch of three to take it to the checkered flag, still banging fenders, knocking into each other, and Sasaki taking the win. So, yeah, I mean, just entertainment. If you'd watch Moto GP, and there's always Susie Perry there presenting to make you put an even bigger smile on your face. So
it fascinates me in Moto GP or on two wheels that the amount of times that they're in the lead and they'll have or not even lead, but they're contending for the lead, and they'll have an incident on their own with nobody else around. Now, you don't get that in cars.
No.
Of course, you get the occasional spin-off, but nowhere near as much.
But then it's not always
so
quick. Because it's funny, if I went to the Silverstone race, I shouldn't diss Silverstone because we've got a big crowd up there, and that track doesn't seem to suit Moto GP 2 or 3. It was kind of processional days racing, and they're very spread out, even in Moto 3. So it is this thing, we talked about it in Formula 1, didn't we? We talked about how, what was the last Grand Prix in
Canada?
Yeah, the Canada circuit just seems to work. It's always exciting. Like Brazil always seems to work. It's always exciting. And Assen is a bike track that always seems to create great racing, and others don't. So I always I've often tweeted about that. I think the tracks need looking at a lot more than the cars sometimes, and safety and stuff, and runoffs and all that. So you just want to get the circuit. So anyway, yeah, very entertaining. Unlike NASCAR, here we go. You see, you thought I was building up, didn't you? To say, mind you, there's nothing more exciting than NASCAR. Well, the trouble is they're in Nashville and they had a rain break. And as soon as you have a rain break and they all go to a garage, you have to wait 2 hours before anything happens again. And I ended up watching the race this morning, catching up on what went wrong. There was plenty of three-wide action and plenty of moments and spins and controversy, but in the end, it was a sort of quite a simple run to the finish line for Chase Elliott. So it wasn't the most exciting NASCAR race this weekend.
Your boy came in fourth, didn't he? Kyle.
Yeah, Kyle.
Yeah.
His car was, you see him, again, you follow a car, it's what's great about NASCAR. His car wasn't working in the pre-rain segment. And he actually dropped about 24th, and he was running about 7th. And again, because his crew chief had been banned, because they get caught slightly cheating, grey area. It's great. You get $200,000 fine, and your crew chief or the wheelman. If the wheelman didn't put if the wheel fell off, the wheelman gets banned for 3 races. So because his crew chief wasn't there to quickly, they were on the phone then having a Zoom meeting with the banned crew chief, and he came out and got the car working better again, and got up to about 4th place. As I said, he finished in 4th place. So you can go up and down that leaderboard in NASCAR because it's such a long race and tactical and everything else. So, but this race wasn't the most exciting. But then we come to
with the most exciting. Well, I tell you what, we come to. This is the most exciting motorsport moment.
Paul
last
Woodman
weekend.
driving a Caterham.
No, not just
was that not the most exciting? Was that it?
Not
you went.
that.
I wasn't there this week. This is your first Goodwood run. How did you find the whole Goodwood experience as a driver?
It's completely different. Goodwood's amazing. I've driven up the hill before, but when influencers like me, I'm not an influencer, but I'm an influencer. When they say I've driven up the hill, it's always typically it's processionary. You go I've been up in an Audi R8, I've been up in a Range Rover, etc., etc. But you're driving up, no helmet, a little sort of run up there, which is it's amazing because you've got all the crowd. But yesterday I did it for the first time in a proper fast run in a Caterham 420 Cup, and Tiff, it was amazing. The whole thing going into the driver's enclosure, you got Nigel Mansell sitting there, and you got Derek Bell and Tom Christensen. It's an amazing experience, as you know. And Goodwood is without question the best motor show in the world. It's like Pebble Beach, Monterey, and Laguna Seca all rolled into one, because you see the cars, you smell the cars, you see them going up the hill as well. So yes, it was pretty amazing. And there was quite an interesting new world record or Silverstone, Goodwood record. The what's your little nickname for it?
Well, you remember Boaty McBoatface, the people wanted to call that boat. So I thought we needed. When I saw McMurtry, I suddenly thought it's got to be the Moti McMurtry, the Moti or the Moto, the Moti McMurtry.
So the McMurtry, if you don't know, is this electric sports car, race car.
fan car.
Yeah, and it's the most bizarre thing. It's tiny, and it's not a car. It's not a car. It's a brilliant piece of engineering, but it's not a car. And Max Chilton, former Formula One
Grand Prix
driver,
IndyCar racer,
yeah, very talented. He drove it to an astonishing 3809. I should know that. Crikey, I should know.
Yeah,
that.
It was something like that. Well, I know jaws were dropping. I mean, on Twitter, everyone's laughing at and thinking. When I saw it, actually, was at Blenheim at the Salon Privé, doing a little drag race across the bridge, which I was commentating on. But it's so complex. There's permanently someone with a laptop plugged into it. I mean, it's an incredible thing because it's got 1,000 horsepower per ton, they say. But it's got this fan car. So it's like the Brabham car that was banned from Grand Prix racing in 79, 78, 79. So it's got 2,000 kilograms. So it weighs a ton, 1,000 kilograms. Well, I'm surprised it's not lighter than that. They won't give the actual weight, but someone's got a lot of batteries on it, so maybe that's why it's a bit heavier. So the power is 1,000 horsepower per ton, but it's got 2,000 kilograms of downforce when it's sitting there. So the fan is fired up and it just sucks itself into that ground.
Talking about racing them, you imagine racing them with all those fans pumping out.
Well, I know a lot of people on Twitter were saying, why is it so dusty following it? Well, that's because the road's been cleaned and shot out the back. So you'd have stones. Well, that was the reason why they banned the Brabham. I think they couldn't find a technical regulation that wasn't quite right, but they banned it on safety grounds because it was throwing stones at the drivers following it. But I mean, someone I think tweeted, I can't wait to see, because I think they're talking about having a one-make race series, but they're not raceable. They're so high-tech, and it's a point and squirt sort of machine, and you couldn't have people racing that sort of power to weight ratio because the acceleration with drivers bumping into each other. I can't, unless they halve the power. Because I mean, how far can it go? It probably only do about, I don't know, with that sort of horsepower, can only do about 2 miles, and then it's got to be recharged. I mean, it was astonishing. And I mean, it did Goodwood a year ago when it did go up previously, and it was sort of very slow and fragile looking, and everyone had a laugh at it. So I have to say, I'm incredibly impressed with the fact they've got it going so well, that Max was able to do that time. And it looked just, stuck to the ground, didn't it?
It just didn't look right. It looked so bizarre. It's like it was speeded up. If you haven't seen it, you need to look at this Murty car, because it's like a Batmobile, but it's shrunk in the wash. It's a tiny little thing.
Yeah, well, I like the fact that it beat Audi's electric car that did the Pikes Peak thing and did Spa. Because I got fed up when they kept on boasting it's faster around Spa than Grand Prix cars, and it won Pikes Peak. Well, Pikes Peak is normally people in garages with V8s and great big wings on the front and back. So obviously if Audi spend that sort of millions and millions, they created a machine. But it's when you're not in any regulation package, you're not competing against anybody except yourself. So, but it is a fantastic achievement, I have to say. Where it takes them, apart from doing demonstrations around the world,
it's not a car. It's not a car, isn't it? I mean, what's the purpose of it? I don't understand. It was just some incredibly wealthy, very with a huge brain on him.
Yeah,
but,
who decided to create his dream machine. So I suppose it's a bit like, in a way, you could say, what's the point of some of these modern hypercars? I mean, how many down at Goodwood in the hypercar paddock or whatever it's called, did you notice you never heard of, like makes one-off?
It was bizarre. I'm supposed to know cars. That's our industry. Yeah. That's what we do for a living. And there's so many I never even heard of. I followed something up. I still don't even know what it's called now. The most bizarre looking thing ever. And everything's a prototype, and everything's a 1 of 5, and we're doing this.
Yeah.
And
$2.5 million.
Everything's $3 million. Yeah, exactly. $3 million and 1,000 horsepower. It's just so bizarre.
Nobody even buys them or uses them. They're sort of stuck in a storage room most of the time.
And like you said about the laptop on the Murty, but all these high performance cars, whether they're ICE or hybrid or electric, they've all got laptops plugged into them because they're so sensitive now. And of course, that's what's happened with the Valkyrie, with the Project One. They're having so many troubles because they're trying to put these race cars on the road.
Yeah.
It was amazing. And seeing the little caterer in this sort of $100,000, £60,000 car next to the Gordon Murray T50 and the Kona's eggs, literally, alongside all these, it was.
And what was your time then, Paul, compared to the 58 second 50? Were you close? Were you 1 minute and one? Were you just over there?
I think I was just over a minute. Yeah, I think. So the Caterham 620R did one of the fastest times ever for production car. I think the second fastest time.
Oh, did
50 seconds, 50.01, with a decent driver driving. And this
was that 1 minute 50.
No, just 50 seconds. And I did.
But what was the McMurty then?
Oh, 38.09. But that's not a production car. That's just.
No, I know.
So I was pleased because I a couple of the corners are a bit tighter than you think, and everybody, including myself, just said, "Don't overcook it
and don't try." I said that as soon as I heard you were doing that. Don't get brave. But I mean, Goodwood as always. The weather was blessed. There was a bit of rain, I think, on day one, but apart from that, fabulous weather. And
thank you to everyone for looking after us, especially Polestar.
And Nigel there. Did you get to shake hands with Nigel? My mate Nigel was there with his Ferrari. It was the centre of attention.
I didn't want to be a fanboy, really, and with his Williams, of course, his championship winning Formula One. The first time I met Nigel Mansell was in 2000 at a golf course in South Africa, Sun City, and he took great pleasure in showing me his scorecard.
Oh, did he?
He's like a scratch golfer.
I know.
He's bloody good at everything. He's one of these frustrating. But I think he's so driven. Black belt karate, and it was golf and.
Magician! He's a member of the Magic Circle now. Nige.
Anyway, there we go. So next weekend, Tiff, we got the British Grand Prix. They're going to be following on my hallowed steps where I got a podium last week.
I've got the timings now. Big weekend. I just got the timings because sometimes you never know what's on, do you? So it was 4 races both days. On the Saturday, Formula 3 at 9:55 in the morning. The W Series, it was quite a good lunchtime. W Series at 1:25, and then the qualifying at 3 o'clock. Formula 2's at 5 o'clock. So that's your Saturday entertainment. Sunday, Formula to get there early for any girl on Sunday, 8:35. The Formula 3 cars have their main race. So get them worth it. You spent all that money. I can't believe only people spend so much money on Grand Prix tickets. And when you get there, they're not watching these support events. They're sort of buying sandwich. They're buying their Ferrari caps and they're in the shops. Watch the racing. Now, you F2 at 10 o'clock in the morning, Porsche Super Cup at midday, where Harry King, our British lad, he finished second, and he's had a second or so, he's winning. Anyway, he's really quick. Harry's going to win. Harry King, we're going to have a British winner of the Porsche, which hasn't happened for a long time. Then the Grand Prix 3 hours later, big gap for lunch, 3 p.m. before the Grand Prix. So, I hope you're all going there. We can't all go there, I guess. No. But it's really good to see so many races as well. Having sort of 8 races is good for the weekend.
IndyCar from Ohio. Races. It sounds like a great weekend. Can't wait for next weekend. I hope the weather's good. IndyCar from Ohio, NASCAR from the Road of America, Formula E from Marrakesh. Just a couple of other bits of news. Breaking
news. Go back to those tracks. Watch IndyCar. That's Sunday night. They're both great. Mid-Ohio road course, one of the best up and down hills, really tight. But NASCAR at Road America, the greatest road course in the world, and they are very spectacular. The Formula E is called Saturday. Don't forget, if you want to bother to watch Formula E, it's on the Saturdays.
No, you're so precise, aren't you? Pierre Gasly's just signed for another year to 2025, actually. So no surprises there, I guess, with AlphaTauri. And what do you think about this news? Yuri Vitz has just been dropped temporarily or until pending investigation by Red Bull because he said the N-word live when he was playing a game, nothing car-related. With his
That's what Kyle Larson did. He was suspended by NASCAR for a whole year. He was put out from NASCAR and he had to take rehabilitation courses. I mean, it's a problem. I mean, it's a shame it happens. I think neither of them were probably saying with any malicious intent. It's just a word that popped out of the back of their heads. Yes. And of course, Yuri's he's in his third year of Formula. He's a Red Bull third year of Formula 2. He's had a terrible season. He's always quick, but he was leading in Baku, wasn't he? Or Azerbaijan, Baku, yeah. And he crashed out of the lead. So his last race, he probably thought his world was coming to an end because he had a couple of mistakes and he's been off. I think in Barcelona, he was in the gravel. So he just had an awful Grand Prix, which he should have won. And now this has happened to him. So you have to feel sorry for him. But then, he's his own worst enemy, as they say.
You are your own worst enemy. I don't know what to say on it, really, because, we spend millions of rehabilitating offenders, and but then one mistake in this, and I'm not condoning it because what an idiot saying it in the first place, or even thinking it. But it wasn't in malice. I did listen to it, but anyway, that's food for thought.
But of course, then you watch the Glastonbury last night and Lamar using the word which black people are allowed to use, and so you sort of, if they keep on shouting the word out, then other young kids, they hear the word, and they a lot of young kids don't think of it as a race thing. They hear the word in a rap song that's used.
It's a cool, endearing
I mean,
way.
you can't excuse it. You must excuse it, I guess, but it's understandable how these things happen occasionally.
Yeah, well, not for...
Sad for him. I mean, his career's probably done.
Yeah, Red Bull won't take any prisoners, that's for sure. But thanks for joining us. We'll massive week next weekend. Look forward to seeing you then.
Good. If you're there, have a great time at Silverstone. If you're not, have a great time watching on telly. Cheers.